Okay, we should be live. Welcome. My name is TJ Gamble. I'll be your host for this evening, and you have tuned in to the eCommerceaholic, where we are here to help you get more from your e-commerce store. Today, I've got a very interesting guest, and we've already talked to one other host in the Magento community, so we're trying to make the rounds here. And I've got Chris Wells, the CEO and founder of Nexcess. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Yes. Now, and guys, just so you know, I've got DJ, my video editor, is not here today, and so I'm completely and totally on my own. So if we have any problems, we're just going to have problems. So I tried to switch to you there on the input, and it looks like it's not working. It is literally just stuck on me at this point, and they just have to look at me. So that's what happens when you go live sometimes, people. You have all sorts of problems. Like, it was literally, I tested it right before I went live. It completely and totally worked, and now it's not working. So I'm going to go over there. I'm going to click on it. You guys just wait. We'll get started here in a second. There we go. There we go. Now you're live there, Chris. So we figured that out. We cracked that nut. All right. So that's what happens when you go live. You know, you just wing it.
All right.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to go through, and I'm going to ask some questions. We're going to talk about some stuff. Please post your questions in the chat. We're going to get to your questions a little later in this broadcast. So, you know, feel free to communicate with us. Let us know how we're doing. Hit that subscribe button. Tap that notification bell while you're at it. Nexcess, you're the founder, like you're the guy, you're the main dude there, right? This is your baby,
right? So that's taken away from the other people that are doing all the good work, but I'm the guy that was there on day one. Yes.
Yeah, I understand. There are a lot of people. I'm the same way. All the people do the work. I get all the credit, right? So you're the guy that gets all the credit.
I get both, hopefully, the credit and the opposite of the credit too. So I take both responsibilities equally seriously. But yes, I'm the dude.
So how did you come about founding a hosting company? Like, how does that work? How do you get into hosting?
Yeah, how do you get into the funny part about the story is that it was in a different internet time. Ultimately, I had the idea in the late 90s of all times when everything internet was massive, and internet was this, not only was it massive, it was this thing that was growing every single day. I first started using Linux in 1997, and so that kind of got me noodling on what you could do with this Linux thing. Back then, web hosting was very, very nascent, obviously, and through the late 90s, it was as nascent as it was in 97 and 2000. But in 2000, I kind of took the jump and figured that was the right time to try this hosting thing. And so we started out of my garage. Actually, it was a back bedroom at the time, and moved to the garage at my house in Southfield, Michigan, about 2 miles from where I'm sitting right now, and took the plunge to this web hosting thing. And honestly, it was because of Linux. It was because of where I was at on a technical basis, and just curiosity and seeing where this web hosting thing could go. But it was a different age. It really was back in 2000.
Now, please tell me you did not have your servers in the garage.
So I did. I had my server first in the back bedroom, but as we're all aware now, there is this thing called heat and noise that the servers make that is unbearable. And so you have to understand, like, I hadn't even seen a server, let alone used one that much when we first started. So these servers were a new toy to me, and I didn't understand the decibel levels and the environmental concerns and so on. So we ultimately took my garage door off. It was like a 1.5 car garage. Took the garage door off, like blocked it up with plywood and 2x4s, made it an actual enclosed space. Put some, I won't call it HVAC. We put some cooling in the space, and ran out of there for almost 3 years.
Wow. I mean, it sounds similar to, we actually for a while, I won't say we started there, but I actually had a little building in my backyard that me and a couple of devs worked from for a while that was very similar. I just happened to not have a garage. But it seems like every great company starts with a "we began in a garage" story, right? I mean, every one of them.
You need space, and you need cheap space, and we had cheap space, and it was just my wife and I at the time, and there was no kids, and it worked out. So, agree. The OpEx there was a different beast.
So, business lesson for all you people out there, keep your overhead low. Start it in your garage or whatever space you have available. There's no sense spending a bunch of money on fancy office space. Hell, I still don't have fancy office space. We're a remote company. So, spend your money on awesome servers and air conditioning, right?
I didn't know that there was a fridge behind you until like you opened it up just a few minutes ago. It looks, actually, it's a nice backdrop. I like that.
Thank you. I give all the credit to this to DJ, the video editor on this channel. The fridge was actually over. It makes no sense in the office over here. We've got like all the other kitchen stuff over there, and he's like, we should put that something in the background. This sign was actually hanging on the wall, so then he just drug the fridge over and set up the little Magento sign. I've slowly started adding things in. This plant here actually hides the power cable for the Jamerson sign, and then I've added a red light that adds like this orange glow down here to kind of offset the orange of the Magento logo. So it's an evolving set, but it's getting there.
So regarding remote, real quick too, you mentioned remote. We were late to the remote game. We spent a long time thinking we had to all be in the same spot here once we did start bringing you on staff, and it's only the last couple of years, say 4 years, 3-4 years, that we actually embraced the remote. Work, and I work a bunch at home, even though I'm not 20 minutes in the office. I'm at home 3 days a week typically because I work weird hours and I work a lot of hours, so it helps. It's huge. Yeah,
we're remote out of necessity. We're strategically located in the middle of nowhere in beautiful, sunny Opelika, Alabama, and when we started looking to hire, when we were really growing, there were 2 or 3 certified Magento developers in the state of Alabama, the entire state. I was one. One was in Birmingham, 2 hours away, and the third one was, I guess, about 2 hours away as well. We gave him a trial. It didn't really work out, so we were down to 2 in the entire state. So our option was training, which was much slower, or just hiring remote. Once I got over it in my mind and started accepting that was just the way we needed to be to grow, it has a lot of benefits. As an owner, there are some romantic ideas you have in your mind, like company barbecues and people collaborating and the teamwork and getting to know them and people being friends and socializing, but none of those things really have anything to do with producing work. So once you get past those things, remote, there's a lot of benefit to it.
We try to do both. We have a barbecue once a year, a big one in the summertime, and we invite everybody, obviously the remote folks as well, and it's a good time. But I agree, it's not a necessity, but it's definitely nice to get around, get together with all the folks and see everybody and share stories and all those things.
Yeah, we've got to do a better job of getting everyone together more frequently, and you do need to have some in-person meetings. We definitely, as cash flow permits, we definitely need to roll those things in. So you guys have how many times a year do you get together and just kind of bring everybody under the same roof?
Yeah, so we do an all-hands meeting once a year, and then we couple that with our barbecue. So this year it's in August, it's in mid-August, and so everybody comes up to Michigan here, and we try to get everybody. It doesn't always work out like that. Some folks have scheduling conflicts. But we usually get most folks and have a big barbecue, a full-day barbecue, and an all-hands meeting and go over where we've been, where we're going, and all that kind of good stuff.
I gotcha. And I'm getting some feedback in the chat there that we're having some audio issues. Guys, I just turned my mic down a little bit, so maybe it's a little closer to Chris's output. Again, my video editor is not here, so if I'm still dramatically louder than Chris, please let me know, and I'll continue to adjust my audio sources to get it correct. We can't hear the actual output. We just hear our own sources here, so your feedback is appreciated. You know, we're continuing to improve. This is a new setup. This is the only the second actual stream we've done. We did a test stream with this setup, so we're still learning, and I keep adding new hardware. We've got a new mixer over there for the audio, so let me know if there's a problem. We will continue to try to adjust and make it better for you.
I can speak up to it either way.
Yeah, yell, man, yell. I think that was the initial feedback, that your audio was a little low.
Okay.
And like I said, I mentioned that a little earlier. It looks like mine might be a little high, and I'll continue to adjust mine down. I'm kind of looking at my sources over there. Eric says it sounds good on mobile. So guys, you know, they say it sounds better now. So maybe, I think it maybe my audio was a little high. I turned it down while you were speaking a minute ago, which allows it to kind of mix a little better together. So, all right. So Cal Evans, one of my favorite people now in the Magento community, he likes to brag that you're a coder, and you know, most people just don't. They don't think, and I know it's not the case, but most people don't really think about coding when it comes to hosting. They envision, you're like, what does a hosting person look like? Well, it's a system administrator with a terminal pulled up, and you know, they're not really writing code. So what kind of code are you writing? What kind of projects are you working on?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, I spend 90% of my time coding. It is literally what I do 14 hours a day. So yesterday was a typical day. I got up about 8:30. I started coding about 9. I went to bed at 2:30, and I had an hour break. Essentially, it was a busy day, and I've got 2 kids, but I spent the entire day coding. Now, what was I coding? So 9 times out of 10, if you're interfacing with us, the company, via something digital in terms of our portal, our services, there is some software running that thing. So our complete cloud platform was written by our team here, with me being part of the team. The CRM that you use to interface with us to pay bills, to open support tickets, is all written in-house. I have been accused of writing and building way too much stuff, which I'm absolutely guilty of. So a lot of our internal stuff, though, was built by us. Again, we've been around for almost 20 years, and in that time, we have built and maintained a lot. And it's not always the best idea to build your own stuff, and I've been trying to extricate us from building everything. That said, we have this bent that we often build, because it goes into what we like to have control, typically, of the customer experience, and that goes down to the nuts and bolts. So that's kind of where we come from, and again, it's both a blessing and a curse. But yes, it's true. I spend typically a ton of my time doing software.
Is that what you have Cal doing as well? He's actually coding, directly reporting to you.
He's reporting to Robert Purcell, who's our development manager. And but we're all essentially on the same team doing development. So yeah, I work with Cal on a daily basis.
So let's get into kind of what we're here for. Let's talk about Magento hosting a little bit. And you guys were early to the party when it comes to Magento hosting. You've really grown your business alongside the growth of the Magento platform. So tell us what drew you to Magento. Like, why did you see this fledgling PHP platform and say, you know what, that's what I'm going to grow my business around?
Sure. So I got to tell the backstory. It wasn't as if we were looking on the landscape and said, like, that thing is going to be special. It was actually the opposite. So before there was Magento, there was Varian, which was the company that Roy Rubin ran, that did, it was an agency, essentially, that he did OS Commerce sites. So he took OS Commerce, Yoav was there doing work along with a lot of the other gang that became Magento. They did e-commerce sites for a variety of clients. So we hooked up with Varian before Magento existed, and we did a lot of their hosting on the back end. We were essentially their hosting and their support for things like email and anything else that goes along with hosting, right? Roy came to me. I remember it vividly. He came to me and was like, "Hey, man, would you host? We're going to build an e-commerce software suite. Would you host it?" Like, literally, like, that was the question. And my mindset at the time was like, "Well, dude, we host like Xcart and CubeCart and OS Commerce, of course we'll host it. Like, we're going to host anything else for that matter. We were in that mindset of like, we are a generic hosting company. So the answer was, yeah, of course. Like, let me know and we'll host that thing. And so ultimately, we started hosting it in the beginning because of the Varian connection, because Roy and Yov and those guys we had worked with for a good 6 or 8 months, maybe even a year before Magento even existed. And then as 2007 went along, Magento started to get traction. And it was funny because I was actually behind. I mean, in terms of like, we were still in this, we're going to do one-off or complex or generic, but we're not going to marry to a platform or an app. And Yov and Roy came to Detroit and pinged me, and we had dinner one night. And I remember Roy saying to me, like, you need to get on this bandwagon or it is going to miss you, essentially. And so, I took his advice. And so we actually spent the time then to look into the platform, and at that point made a concerted decision to actually start doing, specialized hosting for Magento. To be fair, Magento was a beast. Like, it needed specialized hosting. We had it destroying what we had at the time in terms of servers, and it was not your typical off-the-shelf, shopping cart solution. It was not a shopping cart, but that was an e-commerce solution. So, but it took Roy saying, like, dude, don't miss this, to actually jostle me loose. So it wasn't like I had some epiphany. It wasn't even close.
So you just got lucky. You were there early with the right people.
Yep.
And you just got beat over the head with a club and drug along for the ride.
Yeah, it sucks, right? I love to say, like, I had this vision and it was great, and we were going to do, nope. I was the guy, like, deer in the headlights, them saying, like, dude, do this thing, and we were like, oh, okay. That's kind of where it started. So after we got serious is when we got serious, obviously.
So if, just touching back on that story, for those out there that may not know OS Commerce, congratulations. I'm not going to explain it to you. You're just very, very lucky if you do not remember, if you're new enough to not remember the OS Commerce days and how Magento revolutionized e-commerce development. So it's funny to everybody I talked to that was around pre-2008, everyone was doing OS Commerce. It's amazing the market penetration that OS Commerce had and the opportunity that those guys had that they just kind of squandered.
Yeah, and it was complex and it didn't always work quite right. And honestly, Varian did a very good job of taking it and making it usable. And that was where they saw, that was where the Magento vision, I'm assuming, came from, was that, like, listen, we're making this thing usable. It's got the core components. We can do it so much better if we just eject a lot of the other baggage.
Yeah, it was definitely a cleanup job. I think we used a variant called CRE Loaded, which was, basically it with the most popular modules installed on top of it. And so you started with other platforms. You focused on Magento, and so your website mentions other platforms like WordPress that you provide hosting services for. Now, do you put the same level of effort into those platforms? Like, is there like an alternate universe, Miguel Balparda or Jerry Ida, that are going to all of their conferences and doing things for those other platforms, or are those secondary to your Magento practice?
We focus on Magento, it's primary, just because of the client base that we have right now, and we have an investment in Magento proper. In terms of making sure it as a platform, exists and maintains everything it needs to be. That said, there were things before Magento in terms of we were very much a vBulletin hosting company, if that brings up any blast from the past, before Magento. So we had this idea of specialization in terms of making sure our platform existed for certain apps, although we were not discriminatory. We are just more discerning now in terms of what apps we actually put an investment in. Before, it was much more passive. We would host, say, a vBulletin, and there was no partnership there, there was no investment there was no going to conventions, and we make a much more direct investment into the platform, into the community, into everything about the platform and the app, for that matter, on the ones that we choose. So if you see it on our site, we are making an investment there in terms of time, energy, money, definitely effort. So on some level, though.
Okay, so you've obviously got an investment in the Magento platform, and a few years ago, there were a lot of players in the Magento hosting space that claimed a specialty in Magento. And then obviously with the focus from Magento on Magento Cloud, a lot of those guys kind of fell by the wayside. They've you know, they may still do Magento hosting, but they're not as active in the community. They're not really promoting their Magento hosting offering as they used to. So why did you decide to continue your Magento platform commitment, and how do you compete with a hosting offering from the platform themselves?
Sure. So, I mean, you have to understand, too, we have a very large client base of Magento clients. So just for the sheer fact of making sure our clients are taken care of, we have an investment. Beyond that, you know, the Magento Cloud hosting solution is targeting a segment of the entire Magento ecosystem. So there's still a huge piece of the ecosystem there that needs the variety, that needs the competition, that needs the, you know, the differing levels of support, the differing levels of all the things a specialized hosting company can provide. So we're here because there's a need, to be honest.
And we've got Jerry in the chat talking about his shout out. While I've got your attention here, Jerry, I just wanted to say how much I'm enjoying this Barai here from High West Distillery. He sent it back via Gary in our office. I didn't make it to IRCE, but he sent me this. So this is compliments of Nexcess, and it is a very, very delicious bourbon. So I do appreciate it. But speaking of that, I mean, speaking of things like this, you know, you guys, and I don't know if it's, maybe I've elevated my profile and I'm finally in the club. I don't know. Maybe that's it. But it really seems like that you are having a much bigger effort around schmoozing people, right? I mean, the parties, the events, you know, really getting to know a lot of the folks in the Magento community, and it seemed like that the effort was increased around Imagine and also at IRCE. Again, I could be wrong. Maybe I just wasn't invited to the parties before now. But you know, things like this, and so is that the case? I mean, you guys putting a much bigger effort into the community, or am I just now noticing?
Like I said, we try to put a consistent effort into all these things, and Magento is one of our key strategies. So we put a level of effort commensurate with what we think the market can bear and what we think we can ultimately help with. So, I mean, to answer your question, yes, we're trying as hard as we can to make sure that we get in front of all the people that we can to spread our word and to open the nets and to hopefully help our clients get their site stable and fast and all those things.
And you've got the new white paper, which I saw a week or so ago around Magento optimization. So, you know, what maybe talk a little bit more about. I'm always for content creation. There are a lot of people in the Magento community, and I like to think I'm spearheading the YouTube content creation at this point. I may or may not be, but I'm definitely contributing to that. So I try to watch Kaylin's streams. I'm trying to watch Mates Talk streams. Something Digital's doing office hours. I try to participate in those as much as possible. And these white papers like this one, you know, especially when they're really good, like that white paper is, I definitely take notice because I want to do more like that. And so maybe talk a little bit about that, or can we expect more from you? You know, are you going to be sponsoring more events? Are you going to be creating more content? What's the future look like there?
So yeah, regarding the white paper, I mean, I don't know if you remember or not. We had a white paper back in 2013-ish. That was kind of our initial Magento 1 white paper. That was when we had seen a ton of things online that were simply wrong, and a ton of FUD and a ton of, you know, differing opinions, and just said, like, listen, we want to actually like lay out the way we see it. And we're not always right. I don't mean to say that we're right even more than not. But the point was, we said, like, let's put the data out there. Let's write the paperwork. Let's put it all out there, and then people can make their own decisions. And with that white paper, there were some controversial things as it pertained to where Magento ultimately had performance issues. And we kind of laid out that it wasn't on the front end, the web server end. It was more on the PHP end, and that at the time, I mean, it seems logical now, but that at the time was a bigger deal. Anyways, to answer your question, the latest white paper again is just trying to disseminate information, getting it out there for all to see, regardless of where you host, regardless of what you use. It's applicable even across non-Magento sites, and yes, we'll continue. Our goal this year was 1 a quarter, to be honest, and we're on track for that right now. So expect 4 this year in terms of something that's an educational piece that hopefully enlightens folks, that no strings attached. It's just there for the consumers to see.
So, active in the community or not, there are a lot of companies out there that claim to do Magento hosting. What sets Nexcess apart from the competitors?
So everything that we do, everything that I want us to do ultimately focuses on the customer. So the customer is number one, and we try to make every decision internally to make that, to make that visible. So we spend a ton of time on the optimization side, a ton of time on the customer service side. A lot of times it's a non-technical solution that ultimately makes things better or happy, or you're talking a client down for a stressful situation regarding they messed something up or something was messed up, whatever it may be. But the point is, it's a relationship, and we like to think we do a good job at fostering the relationship. That's what we're all about.
So specifically, and this question was asked in the chat here as well, and I'll post this up. We'll get around to viewer questions here shortly, so keep submitting your questions. But I had this one on my list, and so I'm going to have to. Man, it's way too far down my list here, so I'll just ask it. What specifically around Magento Cloud? What makes I guess, how does your solution stack up and compare to Magento's various cloud offerings?
So, first off, you can bring community to us, and it's no big deal, and it can be on the lowest end, and you've got a place. So Magento Cloud is squarely focused at the enterprise level, and not that we don't or can't do that, we absolutely do and can. But we also, again, have this bigger swath of folks who aren't able to spend $2,000 a month and want to come in at a lower level with a community edition to again, like we mentioned regarding the garage, to start with a low OpEx, right? To start out and test the waters. So we're here for those folks, and that has been a big part of the original growth, was just getting that traction on those folks who were testing out Magento, trying it out, starting out with an idea they didn't want to invest their life savings into. Obviously, as you upmarket, we have different solutions for those folks as well that stack up in terms of technology, speed, performance, but also in support. And I'm going to keep hammering on the support side because as a hosting company, it's one of the most important things that you ultimately provide is the support. You are expected to do all the technical things. That's a given, right? You are able to do more on the soft side in terms of support, preemptive or otherwise, that actually makes a client feel like they're getting value.
So basically you're saying, as far as all the hosting companies, the technical is pretty similar. There may be various differences in how technically they host the site, but it's tough to compare technically, but what you really need to be paying attention to is their level of support. Is that fair?
So ultimately, where support is the picture of the entire thing, technical stuff, bundled in there, we often talk about, imagine a mom and pop didn't have an agency and simply found us. Would they understand containerization and Kubernetes and CPUs and memory and all of these jargon? No, they wouldn't. Ultimately, they want something that works. Now, as you get more technical, that's where it matters more, because those clients expect a certain level of technical stuff baked in. That said, though, at the end of the day, it's the customer experience, regardless of technology. Technology is important, don't get me wrong, but the customer experience is what ultimately matters. If that customer is having an issue, they don't care if the servers are, metal, virtual, here, there, otherwise. They just want a solution.
So what does an ideal client look like for Nexcess? If there's a merchant out there that's considering hosting, is there certain complexity to my hosting needs that makes me the right fit? Or what are those metrics I should be looking for?
I don't think about it that way at all. Honestly, if you're using the platforms, the apps that we support, I think ultimately we're a good spot for you. So I wouldn't slice it based on size. I wouldn't slice it based on anything but application, and slice it more on our area of expertise. If our expertise cross-cuts your need, then absolutely you're a good fit for us.
So how do you anticipate the recent news of the Adobe acquisition? It finally closed. So if you don't know, the Adobe acquisition closed earlier this week. How is that going to change the Magento hosting market?
We'll see. I'm curious. So I was thinking about that, obviously, over the last couple of weeks as it's been going on. And, I mean, I want to make sure, and you had interviewed the guy from Adobe regarding the acquisition, and he was very, well, you could talk a little bit about some things, right? So my biggest concern is about community. That said, I don't see community going away, and I want community to live on for the long haul. That's what ultimately drew us to Magento in the beginning, was the open source nature of the whole thing. So in terms of how it changes, that's hard to say. I thought it was funny. So I was a Fireworks and Dreamweaver user back in the day, and those things actually still exist, right, under Macromedia's, not under their brand anymore, but at least under Adobe. So if that tells us anything about Adobe's, penchant for keeping around different platform things, maybe it means something. But ultimately, if you imagine the worst case, in terms of the community goes away, it's open source. There have been efforts to do things with it prior. There'll be efforts again. OS Commerce was open source. It bred Magento. So whatever happens, e-commerce is not going away.
So a question from Ryan in the chat here. He asks, next question, does Nexcess work with Magento to provide feedback on pain points or things that Nexcess does to get performance boosts, etc.?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we absolutely do. It typically goes in terms of, we share white papers, obviously, with Magento directly. We communicate when we can with them directly regarding issues. We also PR to their repos directly. So we actually contributed back to Magento itself. We're working on the PWA stuff right now to help push that along where we can. In testing, we spent all of last week testing the studio and messing with it and providing feedback. So we do, yes.
And so what's next for Nexcess? Like, what does the future look like for the company, at least the next couple of years? Are any big initiatives? Are you doing anything cool with your hosting platform? What's upcoming?
So in April, we released our cloud platform, and so we're continuing to build on that. If you're a client or looking at us from the outside, week by week, that is changing. We had a release yesterday, and typically we release once a week to 3 times a month, roughly. Let's call it 3 times a month. And that has been both growing and getting better week by week, which is awesome. Again, I'm a software guy, so I have my hand in a lot of that stuff that happens on a week-by-week basis. But we are building out that cloud platform to be an application, essentially application foundation. And that will drive essentially all the application stuff that we do forward. We are looking at either rekindling partnerships and or breaking new partnerships with apps and showing them how we can provide the SaaS model for their own app and growing that in terms of support, in terms of technology, in terms of all the things that are needed to make these apps perform.
So let's talk about cloud for a minute. Cloud's a big buzz term. Magento Cloud, Adobe acquired a cloud platform, Adobe's cloud, everybody's cloud. Like everybody's got their own freaking cloud. So, cloud can mean any number of things, really. How do you define cloud? And more importantly, what do you think merchants and developers are expecting from a cloud hosting product?
Yeah, cloud is like the worst marketed thing on the planet, right? I mean, it's the most confusing thing. So, we define it internally. Obviously, 1, it's virtual. 2, it's elastic. If we stop there, I would be happy. We can keep adding, adjectives and other descriptors on it, but ultimately, it's something that you can use and utilize and not have to migrate, not have to change code, not have to otherwise think too much about. So that's my back of the hand definition of it. And again, it's like everybody's got their own. I mean, my wife uses the term, and I want to pull my hair out. What's enough of it? Because it's always some funny use of the term. And cloud to her means essentially it is one infallible. It can never be lost. It's like all these things that on some level are kind of true, but not really true, and it depends on how you see it. But the marketing says one thing. So anyway, I hope that answered the question. I know it's one of those questions that's not fun to answer per se.
It's okay. Everybody who's watching's asleep anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Post your questions. We're getting through my questions. I've got some questions at the bottom of my list that Cal Evans provided that may or may not be good. Who knows? So keep your questions coming, and we're getting to that portion where we'll actually start answering all of them. So we're talking about cloud, and you offer a cloud product. What makes your cloud offering different than what the competitors are offering?
So when we designed the cloud platform, one of our big objectives was making sure we didn't alienate, one, our current client base, two, our current partners. We met with a dozen partners last year individually and asked essentially what they wanted to see in a platform, what they didn't like about both competition and Magento's cloud, and came up with essentially a bridging solution between legacy, or we call it classic hosting internally. I think it's a great term. It's classic hosting. Between classic hosting and cloud. So it's a bridge to get a mom and pop who doesn't maybe understand the difference onto the platform that then provides them elasticity, provides them some level of containerization, horizontal vertical scaling, the virtual things that we talked about in terms of what defines a cloud, without having to ideally migrate past that initial entrance into the cloud platform. So again, it's designed for, one, our client base, two, our partners, and three, what we think the future looks like in terms of where cloud may be going.
So what infrastructure do you offer on that? Or are you hosting on AWS? Do you offer Azure? Or what's your technology stack look like?
So just a little background too. So we are based in Michigan. We're in southeastern Michigan. We bought our first data center here in 2006. We expanded to another data center in 2013, so we have multiple locations within Michigan. What I'm saying is we like to control a lot of our infrastructure, and most of what we utilize, unless it's international or it's outside of Michigan, is in fact owned infrastructure. If it's outside of Michigan, we own the actual gear, but we lease the space, so our facilities in the UK, Australia, and so on. To answer your question, though, it is an OpenStack-based platform, so everything here is both owned and operated by us, and it runs on OpenStack, and that's our virtualization layer for essentially all the automation and cloud stuff that we do on top. And again, after the OpenStack layer, largely written by us, except where we off-the-shelf third-party things to tie in to provide features to clients.
So owning your own infrastructure, what are the real benefits? Like, does that really make a difference? And you want to dive into that a little more?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely we think it does. We take a, we own it approach to the problems and the successes. It helps obviously with the control, the understanding of what is happening when there's an actually service affecting issue. And our folks work to remedy that issue, but we can provide actual legitimate, ETAs, communication that makes sense. I mean, all those things when in fact we have to. Beyond that, there's a cost savings. I mean, a huge cost savings with having it all internal and using a non-public cloud, which we like and which we're used to, and which we're looking to continue, to be honest. I mean, we're not against using a third party or a public cloud. That said, we haven't had the need yet to do so.
And we're getting some questions here in the chat. We've got Eric Heilman from Mage Mojo asking, Elastic, isn't Nexcess Cloud auto-scaling limited to the cores in the chassis and overselling cores if they are not being used?
So two things. We have the current auto-scaling right now is limited to the CPU, sure. That said, we have in late August our containerization platform, which builds on top of the current version, which will scale horizontally based on Docker containers, which will be essentially unlimited horizontal scaling. So again, the first iteration of this is the bridge, right? It gets our clients to a position where they can go and, I mean, a few different ways we can answer it, right? One is we can host all the clients of a given size on the current platform as is, because with the OpenStack infrastructure, we can actually have larger infrastructure, which we do with the new platform. Additionally, there are other things that we could do that we haven't yet in terms of dropping our current clusters into the current OpenStack architecture. But what the answer is the containerization platform, which is coming out in August, that will ultimately allow for horizontal scaling to the point that we won't have to worry about cores anymore.
Okay, next question, and keep your questions coming. We'll try to address all of them. Next question from Ryan F. Has Nexcess ever thought of incorporating DevOps offerings, possibly some Docker Kubernetes support?
So thought about it internally, yes. We had not pulled the trigger on it. We talked again like partners last year, but haven't gotten to the point of pulling a trigger on any platform. I wouldn't mind talking more to Ryan about it though after the fact to understand what he would actually like to see.
So, Post, what do you like to see? We'll try to get it answered here, or you can reach out afterwards to have a private conversation. Another question here from Ryan. What impact does Nexcess recent changes to TLS support have on current customers?
Yes, that's a good question. So the TLS 1.0, it's, again, painful for folks with the classic hosting, right? We are working with folks. There's a June 30th deadline, I believe, for TLS 1.0, and having to transition them to an updated cipher set has been, let's just say, less than fun. If there are certain issues, I'm more than happy to address them too. But we're trying to again make sure that we keep everybody compliant and as stable as we can given the changing atmosphere.
The next question in the chat is from Jamerson's own Mark Schust, and Mark asks, are you using Kubernetes to run the fleet of containers, and if not, what are you using?
So we are using an in-house developed solution as a version 1. We've been looking at Kubernetes for a while, but since we're just going to horizontally scale certain services, we don't even need Kubernetes, to be honest. We can scale as is with our current infrastructure without adding the additional Kubernetes layer on top.
And keep your questions coming. You know, the usefulness of this live stream is always in your questions. I'm going to come up with garbage questions. You guys ask the really good ones. I'm not going to ask about Kubernetes. So keep your questions coming. We're here to answer them. I've locked him up for a whole nother hour and 20 minutes, and I'm going to run out of questions well before then. So please, Post, what do you want us to talk about? It doesn't even have to be hosting questions. We could talk about the World Cup. I know absolutely nothing about it, but you know, whatever you want us to talk about, we can ramble for hours. So I'm going to switch back to the questions I've got earmarked here, and you know, start getting into Cal Evans' questions here shortly. Which you know, we all know those are probably going to be bad, but who knows? Maybe there's a gem in there. We'll keep looking for them. So you know, there's a lot of clickbait writers out there, especially with the onset of cloud, kind of talking about how traditional web hosting is dead and implying that web hosting in general is dead. But you know, what do you see for the future of the web hosting industry?
So I see it. I mean, specialization, but it's been going that way for over a decade now. That said, Web.com just got bought for, it's like $2.1 billion. So who knows? I mean, I do have friends in the industry that are seeing classic web hosting actually growing, depending on what you're doing. But I see the future as specialization, providing value on the support side, especially making the clients feel comfortable translating all this technical stuff into something that they can consume. That's where we're going. That's where I see the industry as a whole going. And again, I could be wrong, but that's where we're pointed.
In the chat here, we've got another question from Jackie. And Jackie asks, does Nexcess have a built-in CDN for Magento? What about WAF? I love the three-letter acronyms. I don't know what half of them mean, but you know, it's WAF. What about, do you have a WAF and a CDN for Magento?
Yep. So CDN, yes, we're partnered with Verizon on the CDN, although we're changing that in the next 6-ish weeks or so. But yes, as of today, Verizon, which used to be Edgecast. As far as a web app firewall, yes. I mean, we use ModSec just like almost everybody else out there. We have a curated set of ModSec rules that are application focused. We've been spending a lot of time on our portal so that these things that we actually have that maybe you weren't aware of will be exposed. So the WAF was actually on our list for this yesterday release. We didn't quite get it in, but it should be on a future release in terms of being able to see, 1, what the WAF is doing, 2, what's being blocked, 3, some level of interactivity with that as well, so you can actually have some control over what's going on.
And the Guardian in the chat, and we talked about this a little bit, but I'll ask it again to make sure we very clearly articulate it. So you know, maybe some folks missed it. So what would you describe as a good hosting client? Someone that knows exactly what they want. What are some good do's and don'ts when looking for hosting?
If it were me and I was going to pick up the phone, call them. If they answer the phone, you've like already weeded out more than half of the companies that you should be dealing with. We don't look at clients as good or bad. Obviously, all clients, I mean, every client to me is a good client. To be honest, we try our best to help everybody. That said, you want to make sure that when things go astray, when things go sideways, that you can actually call and talk to somebody, that you can get help. And just like with any other service, you want to feel like you're getting your value.
And again, keep your questions coming. I'm enjoying this great High West Distillery Brewery right here, compliments of Nexcess. And I told the folks here at the office that I feel like I will have made it when people just start randomly sending me bottles of whiskey. I feel like that's kind of that mark where you know you're actually doing something right. And this, you know, with you coming on wasn't exactly random, but I'm definitely enjoying it. I got a hard time at Meet Magento in the Netherlands because I kept a couple of bottles of whiskey in the freezer, and apparently that's a no-no. I do. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want it to melt my ice, so I try to keep it cold, but I've got the ice ball here. So what about yourself? You're going to be straight up, or are you going to throw the ice on it?
So I saw that question. I left it. It's funny because, like, I've never drank anything, to be honest. I've never tasted alcohol. It's weird. I know I'm weird. And it's not a religious thing. I just never did.
Well, it's, you know, it's good. Don't. Just stay away from it. There's no sense now, right? You've lived this long without it. You're not. At this point. It's terrible. You'll hate it. Don't worry about it. That's a Cal Evan question, so I feel like Cal has set me up now. That's what I feel like. I feel like he knew the answer to that question.
He didn't know. I loved
and he set me up.
I'm weird.
I felt, Cal, what are you doing to me here, man? What are you doing? So setting up a Nexcess site, or a Magento site, excuse me, you know, especially Magento 2, it takes some effort, and lowering the barrier to entry to get a Magento 2 site up and actually production ready, even with the base theme and no customization, just getting it up and hosted and ready to actually start selling products is a bit of a process, and it's an area I think Magento needs a lot of improvement in the near future to continue the advancement of the platform, and we've got to lower that barrier to entry. So, you know, what do you see as the toughest thing to setting up a Magento 2 site, and how does Nexcess get it right?
So the toughest thing is just the nitty-gritty details, right? Knowing all the little bits to make sure that do make a difference. So we wrote internally all of our tool sets to do all the setup. So if you order today, you know, right now, and select Magento and deploy a cloud account, it auto installs Magento 2 with all of these things done, and I can iterate them. But the point is that the fact that I have to iterate them is part of the problem, right? It should be you just click, and within minutes you can get in, because as a customer you don't want to care about full page cache and, you know, all the other bits that go into making a Magento site run smoothly. You want to just out of the box it and have it be running and open. So if there's one thing that's the problem, it's the fact that there are so many details that you. And I say it's a problem. Obviously, you need those problems to be able to be flexible. But the point is, as a new user, it's intimidating.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot harder for merchants to just jump in and install Magento and get going. And so Magento 2 is much less of an alternative for smaller merchants that maybe don't have the resources to hire external developers or those just learning. It's a much less of an alternative to the SaaS platforms than Magento 1 was, because, you know, with just moderate amount of technical knowledge, you could get Magento 1 up and going. So you're saying on your platform, a Magento 2 installation is pretty much just a click or a few clicks, and you're there ready to start customizing.
Correct. No, I mean, a few clicks and you're there, and it's got, you know, all the basic stuff done. We're adding essentially new tidbits in every day from the white paper, from external sources. But it's part of our job is to keep up on what the actual process is for making an install, you know, legit. But yeah, it needs to be easier. I mean, if you look at the competition, right? Shopify, Woo, BigCommerce, I mean, they all are easy. I mean, essentially you're in there within minutes, and you can do the nitty-gritty of what you as a customer want to do, which is put products in, you know, get those things online to be sold, and so on.
And we've got a comment here in the chat, and I believe that's Matt says, which is why Nexcess offers WooCommerce. Is WooCommerce? I mean, again, you mentioned that you're putting effort into the platforms that are listed on your website. Is WooCommerce kind of an area you see as up and coming, or what are your thoughts around Woo?
It's got a place, right? I mean, we've got other things in the mix which will come out soon. But the point is, all of these e-commerce companies have a place. You often don't want the big Magento hammer on the small e-commerce nail, depending on what you're doing. Other times, you got to have Magento. So not that Magento can't handle small sites, it absolutely can, but sometimes to the user, the actual person behind the admin, something simple is better. It's the digital ocean to the AWS, right? They both have a place. They both ultimately solve a similar problem. One's a huge hammer, one's a targeted tool.
So we've got. I think we're getting some folks that are not necessarily Magento or e-commerce folks in the chat, which is great. You're welcome. Thanks for watching. But we're getting some off-topic questions there, like Dan's question of do you play games? Are you a gamer? I guess that's a good question.
My kids are, but not me.
Not a drinker, not a gamer. Okay, got it. We're just going to end it here. Let's.
That's
no,
fine.
just no, I'm not much of a gamer either. I've just started playing Fortnite. Before Fortnite, I would play a little bit with my son. So really NCAA football until they canceled that. Maybe a little NBA basketball. Very simple games. The last time I was a regular gamer, starting this company, basically in college. I had my son when I was 18. I've been a very busy guy since I was 18 years old. So I really haven't had much time to play video games. So Fortnite is really the first game I've played because I wanted to since the original Nintendo. So were you a Nintendo guy? Did you play back in the day?
Yeah, I'm a kid of the 80s, so yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so Dan, I appreciate the question. Thanks for watching. We don't know anything about Grand Theft Auto. I apologize. Yeah, no, we don't know anything about it. The Guardian here mentions that WooCommerce has 678,195 current websites with a 22.76 market share, and Magento is much less than that at 5.08. So, yeah, as a hosting company, I definitely understand why Woo would be a focus. That's a lot of freaking hosting, and apparently they don't have their own, or do they? Does WordPress host WooCommerce sites? Do you have to compete with the platform themselves?
They can, I'm sure. Again, it's a plugin, right? So it's not hard. But the point is, you often have what Woo has is the WordPress factor, right? And the WordPress factor is massive. And so that's why Woo draws in folks that otherwise maybe wouldn't even hear about Magento. But because you have this, they already have WordPress, and Woo becomes an add-on, and/or if they approach it from the other direction, Woo is simply there, and it's marketed on par with Magento. It's a different beast, but the point is it's a valid solution to a problem that exists.
We've got another question here in the chat from Jarrett. Jarrett, thanks for your question. Thanks for watching. Does Nexcess work with AWS, or do you only work with your own cloud and infrastructure?
So just our own cloud infrastructure at the moment. We had thought about it. We had talked about it. We had toyed with it, but to date, we see more value in just providing our own cloud infrastructure.
All right. Cal Evans giving me a hard time here, saying that I need to slow down a little bit, that this counts as work. So did you mandate that everyone from Nexcess has to watch? I saw Jerry in the stream. I think there may have been another couple of Nexcess employees. Is this mandatory, or are they here voluntarily?
If you know me, you know that I don't typically mandate anything, so no.
All right, Cal. This is not billable time, bro. Get back to Fortniting. All right, so let's see. From Ryan in the chat here, is Nexcess paying attention to other serious e-commerce platforms, maybe other potentially emerging platforms like OroCommerce? So are there anything on the horizon that you're paying attention to? I mean, obviously, you kind of mentioned your relationship with the Magento founder. So is Oro or any other platform on the horizon for you?
So the short answer is yes. I can't give details today, but the short answer is yes. And we're always looking for things. And listen, Yov's a great guy. He's a friend of mine. I like Yov, and I'm always looking what Yov does. Yov is, I will follow that guy till the end, to be honest, to see what he's doing. So yes.
So the short answer is yes. What about progressive web apps? You know, is that I think that progressive web apps are the future of all websites, especially e-commerce websites. And I think once it starts to gain traction, it's going to happen very fast because I think there are some significant competitive advantages. What are your thoughts around progressive web apps? And then, you know, in general, and then particularly, how is that going to impact the hosting space?
So I tend to agree, right? I do think it's going to be a fast adoption once it gets to that point. What kind of sold it for me was when I heard somebody bill it as essentially, you know, apps are at this point too hard. That is, you have to, like, you as a user have to do 3 or 4 things to install them, and it becomes this action you have to do. And just for my own usage of app, I haven't installed an app in probably over a year. So to that end, PWA is going to bridge the gap in terms of being able to do the app-like stuff, you know, on your phone without the barrier of the app stores per se. It's got a ways to go. And like I said, we spent last week on Magento's PWA Studio, and it needs work. It just does. So to that end, it's going to require hosting companies to adapt, like we have had to do many times in the past, to providing the infrastructure that makes those PWA apps actually exist in a way that's easy, right? Easy for the customer, because right now it's not easy at all for someone to use PWA, you know, on almost any platform.
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned with how it's going to impact initially the costs of building a modern e-commerce website. The cost of building modern e-commerce is already going up with the Magento 2 technology stack. There's just more technologies at play, and that makes it even more difficult to justify the cost of going with a flexible platform like Magento versus some SaaS platform you can just throw money at every month, or they take a fee and it's not that big upfront chunk. So you know, there's definitely concerns around what it's going to change and how expensive it's going to be initially. Are you kind of seeing the same thing?
So agree. That said, we're not we're not an agency, right? So we're not doing a lot of the front end work, and I don't think as much about maybe the front end as I should, but definitely on the back end side, you know, it's going to take some doing. So let's leave it there.
We'll leave it at that. Keep your questions coming. We're here to answer your questions. I'm about to the end of my questions. We're almost to the end of the mandatory hour I asked for. So how long this live stream goes just depends on you guys continuing to submit questions and us continuing to provide value to you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, tap that notification bell while you're at it. We'd love to have you as part of the e-commerceaholic family. We really need to continue to grow this channel. We need to get at least 1,000 subscribers. YouTube gives us a little more functionality so we can do more things for you. So please hit that subscription button. There's Insider Club down in the description of this video. Join the Insider Club so we'll notify you of the live streams. Next week, we're going to be talking with Bart from Elevate SEO. We're going to be talking about e-commerce SEO. Set your calendar on that. Don't miss it. The Guardian in the chat says, not sure if it's a taboo thing, and this is not really about hosting, but Jamie Foxx moved his site from Magento to Shopify right after Imagine. And I assume that Jamie Foxx has no clue about, I think he's just basically a celebrity endorser of that brand and took part ownership for the celebrity endorsement. But apparently to get on stage at Imagine, you just have to be in the middle of a Magento to Shopify migration.
Right.
Yeah, it just seems to be what it is. So we've got another question in the chat here. Actually, a couple. Yeah, Ryan mentioned we try not to say the S word around here. You know, it is what it is, right? I love Magento. I love its flexibility. Shopify is a great platform. If that meets your needs more than what Magento does, by all means, you owe it to yourself to evaluate that platform. You should not. Your allegiance as a business owner is in growing your business. It's not in what e-commerce platform you're on, and you need to make the best decision for you. You agree with that?
Yeah, so, yes, absolutely, definitely. That said, though, you know, again, you can take a Magento and do all the things that make Shopify appealing. That is, I can in 5 minutes be up and running. Magento can do that. without much effort, right? And so that's why we're trying to make it so that you can get in on the low dollar level with an installed Magento, with simply having all the technical stuff figured out for you and go from zero to running in a matter of minutes, as opposed to, well, I've got to jump through 14 hoops first and download this and sign up there and do these things. So I think we could all benefit from making Magento in any hosted platform easier to use.
Yeah, we definitely want to lower the barrier to entry, but Magento's never going to be the I don't know anything about e-commerce and somebody told me I needed to start a store and now I'm going to drop ship some Chinese goods and I need to get this up for $0 and I'm not even sure I want to spend the $8 for a domain name. It's never going to service that market, right? But we definitely want it for those legitimate businesses that are doing, you know, 100,000 to a couple of million that, you know, are strapped and our cash is tight and they're trying to figure out, you know, what the right platform is to take their business to the next level. We definitely have to continue to drive the costs of Magento implementations down, and we're already seeing it. Just the more experience you get as a developer with Magento 2, the more tooling you build, the more times you've already run into these problems before and you've got that experience to fall back on, the quicker it is to solve those, so the cheaper it is for merchants. I'm assuming it's the same with hosting.
Definitely, right? So back to your point, though, for a second. I would hesitate to put a dollar level at where Magento is effective. I think it could be effective for the mom and pop that just wants to get online to sell. My example is always to sell shoes for some reason. I made shoes at home, want to sell those things. I want to go from zero to selling those things online. Magento can approximate that. Is it the best solution? It depends on your point of view. That said, there are other solutions out there that do it better, and Magento could do better in terms of capturing that, because part of the problem is, as you capture that low end when those companies are starting, you then capture their growth too often, and you can keep them. Replatforming after you've grown 10 times is a huge, huge pain. So grabbing them earlier in the cycle of where they actually, you know, exist is better, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We're going to get back to the questions in the chat. Keep them coming. Dwayne, and I'm not sure I understand your question. Dwayne Ernest, met Dwayne at Meet Magento Netherlands. Great guy. I enjoyed a very nice meal and several bottles of wine on Dwayne and the MageMail, his MageMail credit card. So thank you, Dwayne, and thank you for being on the stream a few weeks ago. He asked, what PWAs do you offer your customers to grow their business after shoring up the back end? And I think we may need a little clarification around that. With PWA, we're talking about progressive web apps, which are basically, you know, it's basically how you build the front end version of your website. So if you would clarify that a little bit, Dwayne, if you want us to touch on that, we'll be happy to get that answered. And the chat has gotten more active, so I keep losing my questions here. All right, Ryan's got a great question here. Ryan says, what's been the biggest challenge of taking Nexcess from your garage to where it is today?
So that's a good question. I hate you, Ryan.
I'd be willing to bet your answer is probably the same as mine, and it's always cash. It's cash flow. It's money. Like, how do you overcome the limitations of growing a business? Yeah,
I mean, but in the initial days, like my wife worked as a barista at the coffee beanery, and I had a programming job, and like I wasn't a full-time, obviously, you know, Nexcess person at the time. So the first biggest hurdle is, when do you quit your job? At what point do you say, like, I can't work anymore because work, while it makes money, is costing me more than otherwise? And that took a year and a half. That was probably the biggest hurdle. After that, you know, it's been a 15-year grind, just keeping busy, making sure that you keep relevant, making sure that you don't relax, making sure that you ultimately keep the tempo up and the pace up. And then as you grow, you get all the problems that growth begets, right? With hiring people, you have to put new processes in place and new systems, and it becomes a spot to absorb time. So keeping focus, I guess, has been my hardest thing. And, you know, I know Ryan knows me. I think hopefully he has some insight as to how much I work and why I work that much, because we've got to keep things pushing.
Yeah, focus is always an interesting thing. I've struggled with it a little bit. You know, anytime, and that's one of the reasons we only do Magento development at this point, because we're not big enough to have enough resources to dedicate to focusing on being great at other platforms. And so anytime you introduce something that kind of, you know, distracts you from your main mission, we always end up, even though it seems small at the beginning, you always end up getting off track, and it ends up slowing down your progress as a business. That's why a lot of business, you know, if they're going to say some buzz term, they're going to say the riches are in the niches, right? I mean, niching
Sure.
down or niching down is a way of just saying you need to focus on something, right?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so Chris Orlando in the chat. I don't know if I remember seeing your name in the chat before, Chris. Welcome to the live stream, and thanks for watching. You're a programmer, so he's asking Emacs or Vim.
He knows the answer. It's Emacs. So it's funny. Let me explain the Emacs answer real quick. It requires an explanation. So I was first introduced to Emacs in 1995 or 94. And that was like, here's this thing called Unix, and there's this thing called Emacs, and that's what I was given. So it wasn't like I ever had to choose. I didn't know Vim existed. Not that I would choose it today, because it sucks, by the way, obviously. Anyways, so I've been using Emacs for, at this point, a lot of years. So I just got used to it, as crappy as that sounds. I will say all of my fingers still work. Even my pinkies still work, which is amazing, because Emacs, for those who know, is a control key heavy editor. Anyways, we're off topic.
No, it's fine. Emacs it is, and apparently, if you look at the chat, 50% of the people in the chat are named Ryan, and 40% of them are named Chris. So it just goes to, you know, at Jamerson, when we hire people, we tend to reuse names. My name's TJ. The video editor's DJ. We've gone through several Garys and Chris's and Shane's.
Yeah.
And,
We're
you know,
Ryan Heavy here too.
yeah, I mean, people tend to just kind of, I guess, run with other people with the same names. So all Chris's and Ryan's are welcomed in this live stream anytime. So Jarrett in the chat has a question here. What's the percentage of clients that you onboard starting new Magento stores compared to already established Magento sites that just need assistance? Is there a strong inbound group of merchants just getting started on Magento?
That's a great question. What we typically see is it's always heavier on folks that already have, you know, a shop, that are coming from somewhere else, even another platform. But the point is, they're coming with something already, less on the side of they're brand new, signing up. It's skewed a little bit, because you see folks sign up to test things out, and they'll do an auto install, or they'll install it themselves, and it looks like, you know, essentially a new merchant, when in fact it's someone just testing the waters. I think the reason is that we've got that mix is because of the agency layer. The agencies bring a big chunk of the business, and the agencies almost always are working with folks that are, you know, either established, or if you can afford an agency, typically you've been around, and you can you've got a shop or a site or something. At least you can spend the money there. The second part of the question, dude, I am absolutely baffled by the mix of folks that use Magento in terms of the industries. Like, it is everybody, it is anybody. Yes, it's tons of fashion, but it's tons of car parts, and it's tons of, I mean, you name it, people are selling it on Magento, and it's cool. I mean, it really is. And do I see a trend? I can't say that I do. No, only because, like, it's so diverse.
Yeah, we're really a little different than a lot of agencies. I mean, we're really dev heavy, development focused. The right project for us usually comes with some complexity. So we do a lot of manufacturers, B2B, you know, high SKU count, which lends itself to certain industries like automotive. And so if you ask me right now, the people we are talking to that are on the board that are leads, I would say it's probably 50-50. Those who already have a Magento 1 site, whether it be Community Edition or Enterprise, and they're looking to move to Magento 2, or those that either don't have an e-commerce platform at all, and maybe they're a startup, or they're a B2B business that just hasn't done e-commerce, or even, you know, they may be on some random platform. So it seems to be 50-50, just thinking off the top of my head. But if I really look at the numbers, I honestly wouldn't be surprised to find that the majority of them actually are not tied to the Magento platform. Now, granted, we do mostly enterprise version, and so, you know, a lot of interest around Magento at this point on the enterprise side, especially with the B2B offering. Let's see here. Man, the chat is moving a little bit faster than I can keep up with. We have some great questions. Keep those questions coming. I think the chat has moved the questions I was looking for onto my second page here. So what is, Ryan asked, what is your personal Linux distro of choice?
So I've run, let's see. We gotta scroll back, right? So in '97, I was on Red Hat. I think you could have been Slackware. You could have been probably 30 other distros. I was on Red Hat first. On my desktop, dual booting Windows. So I started with Red Hat. I think it was 3 or 4. I then ran, what did I run? I've it's just meandered like throughout the Linux worlds. I tried Gentoo for a bit with the whole emerge thing, and like compile all your stuff sounded awesome, and it would be so optimized and great, and it became terrible, like you could probably imagine. I'm not sure a Gentoo guy, of course, and it's awesome. After that, I was on Ubuntu for a long time, a couple of years. Went through to the point of getting SSDs on Ubuntu and having it I got bricked. And it wasn't Ubuntu's fault. I just got irritated and finally switched to Mac. That said, on the server side, we've been a Red Hat shop since essentially day one. So, you know, at this point, you know, CentOS EL7 today.
Yeah, I'm the least nerdy person in the history of mankind. I just kind of want my operating system to work. I don't really care so much what it is. Yeah. We are definitely
so do Linux people.
We're definitely a Mac shop. You know, I've got the MacBook here. Most of our employees, we don't mandate it. Most of them work on Macs. I actually bought the first Windows machine I've bought in probably 3 or 4 years for the live stream. I bought an Alienware gaming rig over there because none of the great live streaming softwares work on Macs. So I don't. Yeah, it is. Wirecast has a Mac version, but it's buggy and doesn't work as well. And you get a little more graphics capability for a little cheaper on Windows. So it was, you know, this is an expensive rig, but it is dirt cheap compared to, say, an iMac or a Mac Pro that would be 2 or 3 times the cost to get the capabilities of that Windows machine. So
we actually, well, here I want to say we try to mandate everybody. We cost less over time, given all the problems that we had with previous vendors on Windows machines in terms of RMAing and just dealing with all the problems. That said, a bunch of our sysops folks are on ThinkPads, so I think we're at this point split between ThinkPad, mostly Mac, on the user.
Mark Schust, who was in the chat earlier, has been doing a lot of work around Docker and setting up our local environments in that regard so that we don't really, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever you're more comfortable with. I want you producing efficient code. I don't really care what platform you're doing that on. So we've really been working on tooling to make that a little more efficient. I'm sure that's the same for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, all the developers use Vagrant, obviously. Actually, I use it off and on. But I mean, it's Vagrant's the equalizer too, Vagrant, Docker, whatever.
Yeah, and we've got another question in the chat here, and it's from Erin. She said, what's the near future for Nexcess? Like, what's coming up for you guys, maybe in the short term, that we need to know about?
So again, our cloud platform was released in April. We're continuing to build on that weekly. We are, honestly, I'm the most excited I think I've been in a decade in terms of where I think we're going, in terms of the app platform stuff, in terms of building the cloud out, in terms of relationships, in terms of I'm going to start getting back to getting to these meetups and these conferences. I kind of took a hiatus while we were building the platform over the last year and a half. So I'm looking forward to being re-engaged. And yeah, I mean, expect to see us around more.
Fun fact here from Jason in the chat says 9% of all Nexcess team members are named Ryan or Chris. So when you apply it at Nexcess, is that some sort of like requirement?
Yes.
It's like this person instantly goes to the top of the stack if they have one of those names.
Anymore, no, it's the opposite. We go to the bottom because the Chris's have taken over and so the Ryan. It's weird, yeah, I don't know.
And we're getting a lot of really geeky programming or EMAC questions in the chat here. Josh, I'm going to ask Josh is like Chevy or Ford?
That's a terrible question. So I own both Chevys and Fords. So I don't have an allegiance. I like all cars.
Yeah, I'm a car guy, and I have no brand affinity. Right now, my daily driver is a Dodge Charger SRT8 Super B. I've got a 1963 Chevy Impala. I've got a 1972 Ford F100, a 1968 F350 Ford tow truck. And my wife drives a Kia Sedona minivan, and I recently bought a 1990 Volkswagen Corrado. So I'm across the board. I could get into any, unless you're a Japanese specific car show, I'm in. That's it.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah. Across the board. And Aaron is asked, man, Aaron's going to ask the tough question here, get right to the point. What host do you see the most turnover from coming to Nexcess? So
I saw that question.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have the data off the top of my head. What I can tell you though is that like you mentioned, TJ, in the beginning, we've seen a lot of hosting companies come and go as it pertains to Magento. So we had this influx of, I mean, at one point there was like 10 Magento specialized hosting companies, maybe even more than that. So we do see the remnants of those folks who, when those companies stop focusing on Magento, or they start to veer away, or otherwise just straight up say we're not doing it anymore. We get a lot of folks from those companies who used to be Magento specific and or focus on Magento and have simply decided not to anymore. And that list is big. It's amazingly big.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be good for business, right? The thing is people instantly thought that, okay, Magento Cloud's out there, and now the hosting game for Magento's died, but obviously there's a ton of community edition. There's a lot of Magento Enterprise that has issues that won't allow them to go cloud, and there's a lot of people that choose not to go cloud. So the thing is what it seems to have done, at least, is that the industry has shrank a little bit, or at least the ecosystem has shrank, in that there's this large collection of Magento merchants that need hosting, and maybe Magento's taking a bite of those, but then the people really specializing in offering that hosting has gotten so much smaller. So for the people like yourself that have really stayed engaged in the community, it seems like maybe your market, or at least your market share, has gotten a lot bigger.
But that's what we see. I mean, to be fair, absolutely yes. And I don't see that changing. I mean, maybe it will become smaller in terms of the number at this point. But that said, listen, I'm optimistic about the future of e-commerce in general. I'm optimistic about Magento. I'm curious to see what Adobe does. Yeah, I mean, programmers are optimists in general. So I mean, don't fault me for that. But I mean, I like where we're going.
Not all of them. Not all of them are optimistic. I tend to be optimistic, but not all of them. Ryan in the chat here, what's the one thing you haven't been able to do with Nexcess, be it because of time, money, focus, whatever, that you wish you could do?
That's a good question. Listen, I mean, ultimately, what makes me happy is when clients are happy. If clients are not happy, I'm not happy. And that literally drives what I do. So it's not even like there are technical achievements that I have to hit, or even size achievements or growth or whatever else. It's about, can we make clients happy consistently day after day, and ideally growth comes because of that. Ideally technical itches are scratched because of that. But I don't look and say like, wow, we missed that thing that was cool, or I want to do that thing but can't. It's always about where the client drives us. And that's why I'm so excited, to be honest. I feel like we're at a point now where we can instantly, if not, where when a programmer says it instantly, that means like a week or two or three. We can instantly turn around and actually do things that clients will feel and appreciate. And so I'm looking forward to that. So I know that's a crappy answer, Ryan. I know it is. I'm sorry. I'm sure I could ponder more and get a more thoughtful answer for you, but that's off the top of my head.
Well, and these are great questions, so keep them coming. We're getting to the bottom of the legitimate questions. I may skip a lot of these just kind of ridiculous EMAC questions or questions that I don't understand, but keep them coming. We do appreciate the input, and this is one of those examples of where you guys provide value by asking great questions. I'm going to answer myself. We had for a while an internal project pipeline where things we wanted to do, and we called them PB and Jamerson projects, so the PB and J projects. And I just wish we had more. I wish we had a bigger business with more cash flow and more opportunities to really explore those internal projects that are not necessarily client driven, because oftentimes those are the most exciting projects for me, because you get to do what you want to do. So are you heading up any internal projects that maybe aren't client driven?
That's a great question. The answer is almost always going to be no, only because everything at some point touches a client or touches them indirectly, right? So what I'm excited about right now, what I'm working on this moment, for instance, is a on-server toolkit for automation, essentially. Now, it touches clients directly because it's doing all the things for the clients. That said, no client's ever going to see it or touch it or feel it. I mean, they'll feel it indirectly, right? So again, though, I'm a programmer and I'm weird, and these kind of things excite me for who knows why. I'm sure our folks in the comments could answer a lot better than I in terms of what we're doing internally that excites them that may not be directly, client-facing. That said, we're an infrastructure company, right? Everything we do in some way, shape, or form is going to be seen by directly or indirectly some client somewhere.
Yeah, and your business model is a little different. For me, most of the work we create is paid for by a client. A client says, I need this, and we write this, and then we get paid for this. Hopefully, we get paid for this. You're a little different in that yours is more, they're paying for hosting, and you're continuously improving that hosting. So I understand the difference there, whereas it's a little different. And I'll give you an example. Like we had... I had this idea when Google Material first came out, and it was a really kind of cool and interesting design concept from Google. And we wanted to do a Google Material Magento theme. And I would still love to do a Google Material Magento PWA at some point. So I registered. I came up with the name Magerial, like Mage Gerial for material. Registered the domain, and we had it for an initiative, and we started playing with it a little bit. But it's just one of those things. If a client's not paying for it, sooner or later we get busy, and it just falls by the wayside.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so to that. We've got a lot of things internally that we're doing that clients don't see it, that I'm excited about in general. That we've had a big data platform online for 18 months that's got oodles of data that we can at our fingertips look at, that we want to expose to clients also that we just haven't yet. I'm itching to do that. We've got other big internal projects that ultimately will manifest in terms of something clients can see. So those are things that are exciting. But I'm rambling. Sorry, TJ.
No, it's okay. That's what we're here for. You keep your questions coming. We're going to call it quits when the questions keep coming. Miguel in the chat here, another Nexcess employee. Do you ever sleep? Blinking doesn't count.
Ask what IDE? So I just use Emacs. There's no IDE.
Yeah,
just Emacs.
I use Dreamweaver. All my coding's done in Dreamweaver.
Really?
No, I'm kidding. No. We're pretty tied to PHP Storm as far as an IDE. That's pretty much what everyone uses. I mean, we don't mandate it, but it has so many it has so many Magento plugins and things that, especially on Magento 1, made it really easy to kind of debug the problems and to generate Magento code. But I'm not producing an awful lot of code anymore, and honestly, I don't know if I want to. I like to do what?
Why not?
Well, it's just I was a coder for, I guess, 16 years of this company's life, 17 years of this company's life, and I enjoy coding. It's fun, and I will do it from time to time. Like I've played with our website a little bit, and I'm working on redoing it as a PWA. It's just, I keep running out of time to actually focus on it. But I feel like my value is better suited, my time is better suited, utilizing my experience to consult with clients and make sure I steer them into the right direction. And it just boils down to not having time to actually produce code. Now, if you get to why I don't necessarily want to, I don't know. I'm one of those people, like when I went to college, I started in architecture, design, and construction at Auburn University. Actually, what led me to Auburn University is they had a fantastic architecture program. And I went into architecture because I'm one of those strange people that is very technical, but I'm also artistic. And so, I draw pretty well, even though I don't really like drawing that much. But I wanted to be able to design. I wanted to be able to do something creative. And then I wanted to be able to do something technical. So design a building, build a building, right? But as I've gotten older, I've found it's really difficult to switch the sides of the brain to do that effectively with both. And so most of my time is actually spent in a creative mode, whether it's, figuring out ways to better improve this live stream or to create videos, or even consulting with clients on creative ways of overcoming some of their challenges, creative ways of overcoming our own business challenges. So I spend most of my time in the creative mindset, and switching to the technical mindset, I find it very difficult to effectively switch and to produce quality results. Do you not see the same thing?
You said something. No, you're 100% spot on. That said, the interesting part of what you said was that you felt you were most effective doing the creative side, essentially. And it's funny because so my role here is weird, I'll be honest. And I ultimately will do whatever job I need to do to help out everybody else the most. That's what I see my role as. And so as of right now, that role is manifesting as developer. Now, what's nice about the developer side is on an infrastructure business, you can essentially touch clients, right, in terms of what you're doing almost directly, since we don't have the consultation typically in terms of there's a sales cycle, obviously, but the ongoing life of a client is driven by what we do, the portal, the back end, on all those systems behind what you're ultimately paying us for. So that's where I see my value at right now is making either lubrication of the system, helping solve problems that otherwise wouldn't see the light of day, nudging, poking, prodding, pushing things over the cliff, maybe if they need to be pushed up, essentially doing whatever can be done, from whether it's sitting in support and helping there, or programming, or whatever else may happen. As of today, though, it's development, and that's where I see a huge portion of where I have value and where I add value to the company. I'm sure it'll change. In 2013, I spent about 3 months in support, doing support, essentially tickets, level 1 tickets, level 2 tickets, whatever level ticket was needed. Hugely beneficial. And so to that end, this year we're having everybody kind of rotate through and do a week in support, regardless of technical level, just to get an idea of why we're here, why we're important, why clients ultimately choose us, pay for us, and when clients have a problem, what those problems are and why we should care about those problems, and so on. So no, it's cool to hear. I mean, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and that's just a general business lesson there. This is not even a general business live stream, but if you start a business, sooner or later, you're going to end up being a hole filler. That's what you're going to do. If you have a gap in talent or you have a gap in time, you're going to find yourself filling that gap so that you can continue to improve as a business and better service your customers. And it sounds like we're both in the same boat there.
Absolutely.
All right, so Jarrett in the chat, another question here. Jarrett asks, can you talk about why you chose OpenStack over its competitors, and will you be leveraging it in any unique way that is different than, say, Rackspace, who specializes in that cloud offering?
Sure, and so OpenStack was, they're the market leader in terms of what they do, and so that was a clear reason to choose them. They've got a huge following and a huge amount of backers, so it, again, made it an easier choice. Our staff is already familiar with it. I can go on. That said, we use it right now simply as a virtualization platform. Any secret sauce is built on top of it by, again, our folks and or by off-the-shelving things that we add. What's nice about OpenStack is it provides you essentially a menu of things that you can choose from to do. So we don't use but 5% or 10% of what OpenStack could do, because those things we're doing in a way that's unique to our situation, and or our clients require a special purpose solution for what it may be. That said, it's accelerated development astronomically, which has been awesome. I won't mention what we were doing before that, but it wasn't good.
All right, so in the chat, Ryan McDonald, Magento Cloud has a rigid workflow you have to buy into to deploy. What's that look like on Nexcess Cloud?
That's one of the things that when we interviewed these agencies last year, the biggest takeaway was that they didn't like Magento Cloud imposing a workflow. And the workflow was, you're familiar, right? You're an agency, you have a workflow that works for you, and Magento Cloud has a certain way they want things to be done. Ultimately, our solution was workflow agnostic. That is, you could bring your own workflow to the table and use it in a way that's comfortable for you, while also being able to do fancier things or newer things, or dabble in different workflows that weren't necessarily dictated. So that's one of the big differences between Magento Cloud and us, is simply the flexibility of how you can work with our system versus it.
So guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to the live stream. We appreciate you joining us, and keep the questions coming. We've got 30 more minutes. If you keep asking questions, I will force Chris to stay here for 30 more minutes. And if you quit asking questions, then we're just going to go away. Cal Evans in the chat here is speaking my language. He gives me a big war eagle. For those that may not know, I'm in Opelika, Alabama. I'm strategically located in the middle of nowhere in Opelika, Alabama. My office is 1 mile from Auburn, which is home of Auburn University. War Eagle is their battle cry, basically, for their sports teams over there, of which I'm particularly fond of their college football team. So Aaron in the chat mentions that I am the face. I am the very pretty face of Jamerson. That is what I do for a living. Thank you, Aaron. I wished that's all I had to do was be the face. Maybe someday I'll be able to retire into one of those cushy e-commerce evangelist jobs. I'll be the Magento evangelist for Jamerson, and somebody else can do all of the actual decision making and work. That is a dream of mine, but I feel like that's one I'll probably never obtain. Working myself out of a job is probably not something I'm going to be able to do. All right, Ryan asked another question here. Could there, and he's talking about in reference to the Nexcess Cloud offering, could you elaborate on the flexibility?
Sure. So ultimately, you get your own SSH account. You can do anything with it that you will. Every member of your team gets their own. They share the same ultimate view of the system. So from that, you can do automation of many sorts. We don't lock you into a build, develop, deploy, etc. workflow. So it's just a matter of, again, providing basic access, what I would call basic access to the system that allows you to do Unixy things.
And if you have more specific questions around the flexibility, please ask them. We're running out of questions here. While I've got you, everyone go right now, hit a thumbs up on this video. That helps us. That helps promote this video. If people are searching for Magento hosting, we don't want them to find some garbage content on the internet. We want them to find this great interview with Chris at Nexcess. So hit that thumbs up. And again, keep your questions coming if you have any. Otherwise, we're going to be calling it quits here shortly. So I'm looking over Cal Evans' questions in our internal document, and the rest of them are just complete and total garbage here. Cal, I'm sorry. You put some garbage questions. There were some good ones at the start, but now the ones that are left are they're just weak sauce, man. So guys, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes here. We're going to ramble, and if you don't have any questions, we're going to call it quits. So any big plans this weekend, Chris? What you got going on?
I typically work weekend. I work almost every day. So I'm going to be working this weekend. I've got nothing special planned. I'm going to take the week, ideally the second off, and hang out with my kids and mess around. They're on summer break, obviously. So That said, I'm a workaholic.
I understand. I've been there, done that. I'm trying to do that a lot less lately. I spend a lot of time thinking about the business. I try to spend a lot less time actually doing things because traditionally it was nothing to work a 90 or 100-hour week. I actually worked. I worked 90. I want to say I worked every single day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, everything for the first 4 years to get this business off the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was very similar for you, right? At least 4 hours a day, 365 days a year to get it off the ground, because that's what it takes, especially when you're young and cash strapped, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. There's no choice, right? You said it's simply the only option.
Yeah, so I've got something exciting I'm doing this weekend. We own a little farm. I call it a farm. It's some land on the outskirts of town, 21 acres, and we have there's a camper set up out there. It's on power and water and plumbing, and we are actually selling our house. I've got a house in town here, and the cost of living here is dirt cheap. So I've got a 4,000 square foot house with a guest house in the back on like 2 acres. And it's dirt cheap. Like, I mean, the price of real estate around here is ridiculous. So don't think I'm rich because I've got 2.5 acres and a 4,000 square foot house. It was built in the 50s, architecturally designed, and it was cheap. That's why I stayed in Opelika and I haven't moved somewhere else. So we're selling that house, and my wife and I had this idea, because we're a remote company and our kids are homeschooled. We got 3 kids, but two little girls still in school. Our son is older. We wanted to do this kind of nomadic lifestyle to where we basically Airbnb different places every month, and we just kind of move around the country, coordinated around a lot of Magento events. And we weren't really able to pull it off, but we're going to sell the house, and we're moving into this camper until we can build a house out there, and use that as a test to whether or not we can live in those kind of constraints, so that we might be able to actually kind of live nomadically. You ever? I mean, you guys are not tethered as well, and you're in Michigan. You ever thought of kind of getting out of there and going somewhere else?
No, never. So, no, it's funny too, because like, we bought our house in 2004, and I think it's like 1,300 square feet, and I am never moving ever. Like, I don't want to move. I don't want to go anywhere. I am like planted. So, no.
But I love the house we're in. I really do. It's a wonderful house. It's a wonderful place. It's a great location. It's a wonderful neighborhood. The thing that gets me is I learned this lesson the hard way with my wife's family, and is that if you have a horizontal surface, someone's going to be sleeping on it. And so, with that much space, we just attract people. And so I just want to, let's kind of pare it down a little bit and let those people, move somewhere else. So we got a guest house in the backyard, and we got 2 people living in it because it's got 2 bedrooms. So, we're kind of just simplifying a little bit, and then just kind of testing the waters on. We don't want to move necessarily, but we want to go experience the world a little more. And I want to be able to do it when my kids are young. We've got a few questions in the chat here. Ryan, I agree with the folks in the chat. Ryan is on fire, and this is what the value of this live stream is, really, is that you guys get to come ask the really great questions that maybe I didn't think of. So Ryan, his next question is, what Magento-specific hosting competition does Nexcess keep an eye on the most? Like, who would you consider your biggest competitor?
So traditionally, it's always been Rackspace, and they've changed over the last, X years now. To be, again, it's one of those companies that has gone in and out of the Magento space at this point multiple times. And so, yeah, I mean, they have typically been the ones that we see the most quotes against and get the most clients from, depending on the month and the year and so on. But they've always kind of been the ones that we've looked at as, I mean, Pier 1 was there for a while back in the day, but Rackspace, even to this day, does some Magento stuff on some level.
So yeah, I definitely I understand that. I mean, and Ryan kind of puts this another way here. But I mean, didn't Rackspace? Didn't they recently fire their entire like Magento focused support staff?
Yeah. I mean, it was further away than recently, but yes. So I mean, whether they're still in the game or not, who knows? But the point is, we still see them as we see clients from them. Is what I'm saying. So traditionally, they had been the one that was, fanatical support. Any answer I give is going to be, through the colored glasses of support ultimately. And it's funny because like I'm less impressed by technical stats or technical companies than I am about companies who go an extra mile for a client, or I hear do X, Y, and Z in terms of a human person doing a thing for a client. And I haven't heard a ton in the space. I'm sure they exist, and I'm sure ultimately, if it was me outside of Nexcess looking in, I would say the same thing. Like, that's all this stuff is great that you got going on, but are you taking care of the client and how? And I haven't heard a lot of people trumpet, X company or Y company, and I'm including us in that list. So we can all do better.
Now, Ryan also rephrases it a little bit, and I think this is a completely different question. It's interesting, so I'll ask it here. Sure. What players in the Magento hosting space does Nexcess recognize as being the innovators or the ones that are really driving innovation and competition?
On the hosting end, I'm assuming?
Yeah. Who in the Magento hosting space? Is there one particular company out there other than Nexcess? We'll just rule that one out. Is there one company out there that you consider really pushing the envelope in the Magento hosting ecosystem?
And not that I'm going to name outright, no. Ultimately, we've got all these companies have gone to the wayside. I was actually fond of some of the companies that were doing things in the Magento space a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. At this point, I think we're all fighting the same battle, to be honest. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and Ryan, quit trying to get us to name competitors, damn it. What's wrong with you? I'm just picking. Keep the questions coming. Ryan Smith, we just got tons of Ryans in the chat here. Love all the Ryans in the chat. And Ryan mentions he came in late, and we did touch on this a little bit, Ryan, but we'll recap. We got a little bit of time here, and the questions are a little slow. So I came in late. So this may have been asked, but what kind of impact do you think that Adobe will have on Magento after the recent purchase?
Again, we'll see, right? I think we're all kind of thinking the same thing. I mean, again, for us, on the community end, if it exists and continues, which I think it will, I think it's a good thing for everybody. Magento needs that lower end to be that funnel that gets clients in. On the enterprise end, I would assume they're going to continue with their cloud stuff. It may or may not change, I guess. If you're Adobe, you're going to change some things, and we'll see how that works. But the point is, on the community end, I'm most curious about. I think that's where we're going to see if they change it a lot, I'm going to be either irritated or not. We'll see how it goes. But I mean, what's your take there, TJ? Too. I mean, ultimately, we're all just pissing in the wind.
Yeah, like I've said it on the live stream, but I know maybe we've got a different viewer base here today. I think it has the potential to be really, really good for Magento and the companies in the ecosystem. And I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad that we're in it. I'm glad that we have the foothold that we do have and that we're a growing company. And I hope Adobe will just add fuel to that fire. As an agency owner, I'm also concerned because it always seems like business is always about a shifting landscape. The market is always moving, and you're navigating those troubled waters. But it always does seem to suck that it seems like I get to the 20-yard line and I'm about to score, and the goalposts move, or the whole game's rules change, and so now we have to adjust to that.
I mean, two things though. The purchases. One, I mean, e-commerce is not going anywhere. I think I mentioned that before. E-commerce is here to stay. It's going to be growing. It's going to be a thing. And two, Magento is worth $1.6 billion. I mean, that alone is amazing to me, and kudos to those guys for making that thing happen. It says a lot about Magento and about the community.
No, absolutely. It definitely says that it tells that the platform is definitely worth the investment, and so I think it'll continue to grow. I find it interesting, the timing, when it comes in right around progressive web apps. I think progressive web apps are a great opportunity for Adobe to non-intrusively start adding some of their Experience Manager stuff into the Magento platform. So I think there's the timing there with progressive web apps kicking off probably lessens the likelihood that we're going to have some sort of major shift in Magento's focus, and probably more likely there'll be some sort of PWA-based integration of Adobe's other services. But that's just speculation. Nobody really knows. Again, watch the interview. I've got an interview on this channel with Matt Assi from Adobe where he answers some of those questions. And I'm going to try, now that it's closed, I'm going to try to get some of the Magento higher-ups on the live stream as well to discuss it. So look for that. Hit that subscribe button.
It's a good thing.
Do what? That he's staying on?
Yeah, that the market is staying on is, again, it says something.
Yeah, it definitely does. Typically after an acquisition like this, they'll stay on for a while. We'll see if it's long term or if it's just kind of a short term thing. But I think we'll all be fine. So in the chat here, Ryan, another Ryan, or one of the Ryans, asks, "What's the most amazing thing you've ever seen or done yourself for a customer at Nexcess?"
The most amazing thing, I don't know. We had an issue the other, off the top of my head, we had an issue the other night, and that's a bad example. They were having an ordering issue, and I plugged in my credit card and made sure the order went through and just gave them the month for free for the sake of, they had gone through enough irritation. I have stayed up 36, 37 hours over a Thanksgiving, missing Thanksgiving dinner, missing the day after Thanksgiving, and so on multiple occasions for clients. Ultimately, that's why we're here. That's why people are paying us.
Yeah, that's it's funny that you mentioned missing Thanksgiving. That's kind of one of the reasons we got out of hosting. We used to do a little bit when we were doing a lot of small merchants. We had our own server, way before servers and hosting was as complex as it is now with cloud. But we had a sysadmin. We did a little bit of hosting, but 99% of the times, if I had to miss a weekend or a holiday doing something for a client, it was a hosting related issue. That right there was enough for me to say it's not worth the money. So it sounds like it's definitely wasn't just us, that this is a common problem that you just never can tell when those problems are going to creep up. So it's great to see that a company like Nexcess will do what it takes regardless of when the problem occurs.
We try, man. We really do.
Yeah. So next question. Your logo basically says Beyond Hosting. I say basically. It says Beyond Hosting. They actually had me update the logo on the thumbnail for this video to make sure it had the Beyond Hosting in the logo. So it's all about that branding. I get it. So Ryan, another Ryan. This is the third Ryan we've had submit a question, maybe the fourth Ryan. I can't keep up with the Ryans at this point, but in regards to Beyond Hosting with Nexcess, what would you personally define as going beyond in reference to Nexcess's services?
In reference to, we have again, it's a traditional problem I think a lot of hosting companies have in terms of drawing the line as to where a question or problem is the hosting company's or somebody else's. We try to push that line as far into our corner as we possibly can. You win some, you lose some, you get in quagmire sometimes, you don't. But the point is, any customer reaching out to us deserves time, they deserve responses, they deserve all our best effort, essentially. And so the Beyond Hosting means you can contact us for essentially almost anything, and we will try and do our best effort to make sure you're happy, even if it doesn't squarely land on our laps. It doesn't mean we're not going to respond with "that's not my job," is what I'm saying. Granted, there are some things we cannot do, and we will try to make those clear. But we try. Dude, we're here for support. Like the way we grew in 2001 was me answering the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, even though it was just me. The reason we grew was because I happen to be a programmer, and we happen to be doing PHP things, and I happen to be able to fix problems that no one else would touch because they were problems, and who likes problems? So the idea of Beyond Hosting is help the client. Like, that's why they're there, and that's why we have jobs, and that's why we're growing, and that's why all these things are happening. So it's a hard thing to convey, I guess, even internally, for that matter. But I mean, I personally believe it.
All right, Ryan in the Ryan. I don't even have to say the questions come from Ryan anymore. They come from a Ryan in the chat. I think this is Ryan Belial. Please let me know, Ryan, if I mispronounce your name. I apologize. I'm terrible with names, and my southern accent makes it worse. When is the next version release for Nextra?
So Ryan Belial is trolling me right now. It's an old system that I wrote back in like 2002 or something that has lived on beyond its expiration date.
So this is an internal joke we're all privy to now.
Yeah. You can skip Mr. Belial stuff.
Eric Heilman giving me props on, I'm assuming, the living in a camper and then Airbnb around. We're excited about it. We hope to get the house up for sale within the month. If I could find a reliable contractor that'll come do a few projects around the house, which is harder than it seems. We would already have it up for sale, but we're really excited about it. My kids love travel. They're great about travel. My wife would travel, every week if finances would allow her to do so. So we're excited about the opportunity, and it's going to be fun, and we're going to give it a try. Cal Evans has been giving me a hard time about not inviting him up to the middle of nowhere, Alabama. Cal, hit me up. Come up. Let's go to a football game or something. Let's wait till football season. I need a reason to go to football games and write it off on taxes, so you let me know, and we'll figure that out. All right, so another Ryan, one of the Ryans in the chat here. Since Chris has shared that customer service is what he deems the main differentiation between providers, is Nexcess support US-based, or what's the on/offshore ratio look like?
So we have Miguel, right? Miguel is Argentinian.
Well, he's not really based anywhere, right? Miguel's not based anywhere.
Miguel, you mean?
Yeah, he's a roamer. I don't know if he's necessarily based anywhere.
No, Miguel is definitely a nomad. So I will just say we're 99% U.S. based. Miguel's Argentinian. We may have. If I don't say 99%, someone else will be like, "You forgot about me, man." So 99% U.S. based, and of that staff, we've got a contingent in Austin. We've got in Texas. We've got a good 15, 20 people. In Michigan is the bulk of our staff. In the building I'm sitting now is our offices. That said, like I said, we have embraced remote, so we've got remote folks all over the U.S. as well. And I probably could not even name individual cities, but we're 99% U.S. based, with Miguel being the one that off the top of my head is Argentinian.
Ryan F. in the chat here. Does Chris view the Rackspace fanatical customer support motto as the bare minimum standard for support? Or what does Nexcess do to build on that or differentiate its support?
Yeah, no, I don't like the fanatical support model, to be honest. I mean, it's something that they always pushed that I never bought as a customer, as a competitor. I mean, our culture, we've got, our stated goals, everything about what we do is about the client, ultimately. Yes, technology is in the mix. Yes, it matters, but ultimately, client-focused everything is what we're about. So the culture, we try and build one that puts the client first, that says go beyond, and we have a list of 6 or 7 or 8 directives about going beyond. It's beyond you, it's beyond the company, it's beyond fear, it's beyond all of these things in terms of what it means to provide customer support that we look at and say, dude, that's awesome. And so we try and do it internally between the internal teams. We try and do it externally. We are not infallible. That said, if we screw up, we're going to try better next time. And but no, I don't use Rackspace as a beacon of any standard.
All right, Erin in the chat here, and she asks, for your Magento support, are your team members certified? What's the SLA? What's the general scope?
So general scope is almost anything you can ask, we'll try and get an answer for. That includes application level stuff, obviously environment level stuff. In terms of certifications, some folks are, some folks aren't. We don't mandate it. We have a breadth of 10 years of experience in Magento as it is. Certifications are great. I'm not saying they're not good. That said, we don't mandate. And the last bit was minimums, let's see. SLA, off the top of my head, I could not tell you what the SLA is. I believe it's 4 nines or 5 nines, but I'm concerned less about the SLA and I'm more about what we're going to do for a client should there be an issue. SLAs are always something that are held up as a guarantee, and they almost never, in fact, are that guarantee. So it's much more about what you do with your SLA in terms of helping out a client, explaining, fixing, putting effort forth, and so on, as opposed to pointing at it as a reason that you're better.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone watching. If you've got any final questions, throw them in the chat. Maybe we'll get to them. But we're about to call it quits here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Hit the thumbs up on the video, please. Those types of things really help me out if you want me to continue creating these types of videos. We also are taking suggestions on topics and guests. So, you can hit those, send those to me on Twitter at eCommerceaholic, or post them in the chat even. It'd probably be, you're more likely to get me, obviously, on Twitter. We've got some great guests lined up. We've got Bart coming on from Elevate SEO to talk about SEO next week. In the following month of July, we're going to have someone on from Yotpo talking about reviews. We've got someone from Banana Stand IO. We're going to talk about social proof, along with other guests. We got a lot in the works, talking about user experience and all the things, all the topics that merchants need to know to do modern e-commerce. So please continue to submit ideas and guests, and we're going to take a couple of more questions, and then we're going to call it a day, and we're going to all go and enjoy our weekend. Let's see. I'm looking at the final few questions here. Ryan asks, what critical thing do you, Chris, want everyone to know about Nexcess?
Sure. We're human. We're here for our customers. We're here to make sure that everything that you want us to be is met. We spend a lot of time and energy putting together our solutions, and we're going to continue. And we're excited about where we're going.
Fantastic. Sahil, again, I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Please correct it. I would love to get that right, but I'm terrible with names, and my southern accent doesn't help. So Sahil asks, how does Nexcess support team draw? Let me make sure I read this. I need to read. See, I should read these ahead before I start trying to just read them live like this. How does Nexcess support team draw a line when it comes to issues that come in gray areas? For example, the customer complains that their Magento site is slow, but it is not something from the hosting side. So I basically, just to kind of clarify the question, and we run into this a lot as an agency. You've got a problem with the site. It's slow. There's a problem. There's an issue. There's some sort of fatal flaw. And, is it code or is it hosting? You don't really know for sure. Sometimes the agency will say it's not on their side. Sometimes the hosting company will say it's not on their side. How do you support agencies and merchants trying to identify those complex problems? So
with data, typically, I mean, it stinks because it's one of those subjective things. If it can be measured, we can typically show you where a problem occurs. It's a delicate conversation, though, because nobody wants to hear we can't help you, and it's one of the things we hate to say is we can't help you. So ultimately, we don't want to say, it's not our problem, talk to your agency, and vice versa. I'm sure the agency doesn't want to do that either. But if it's something that cannot be fixed on our end, ultimately we have to, do what's best without saying, no in those words. But it's a as you can hear my answer bumbling out, you can tell how delicate it has to be sometimes.
Well, thank everyone for watching. Again, please hit that subscribe button. Join the Insider Club. It's in the description. Throw in your email address. We're going to notify you when we go live what topics we have. We're going to do some cool things with that Insider Club in the future, like some giveaways. I've got my team working on like some cool custom promo stuff. All of that'll be available, and we'll be giving some of those away to the Insider Club. Again, next week we're going to be talking about SEO with Bart from Elevate SEO. Chris, I appreciate you being on the stream. It's been very informative. I thought we had a great audience, although Cal was very short of his 200 concurrent viewers. I thought the Ryans, the group of Ryans, did a great job asking questions. Everyone did a great job of asking questions, but the group of Ryans.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks, Ryans. Thanks, Chris's. Thanks, everyone. It's been great.
the Ryans and Chris's. So thank you for watching. Again, I'm gonna hit stop stream here. We've got to work on starting and stopping the stream. I've got some things in the works, but after I hit stop stream, then I got to like stand here and say, are we off for like 10 minutes to make sure we actually stop the stream. But we will see you again next week, 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern time. We go live, so I look forward to seeing you in the next video.